All right, everyone. Well, it's really nice to see you all this morning. I think we'll get started now. My name is Jessi. Thank you all for joining us today. Before we get started, I just want to say thank you to our headlining sponsor, the Paul G. Allen Family Foundation. We're really grateful to foundations and corporations who continue to support cultural nonprofits like us and hopefully yours as well across the state.
Inspire Washington acknowledges that we and our cultural partners statewide are on the homelands of Native peoples who have lived in this region since time immemorial. We pay respect to their elders, both past and present. We also acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands where all of our cultural partners live and work. Currently, there are 42 tribes, 29 of which are federally recognized, that share traditional homelands and waterways in what is now Washington state. Some of these are nations and confederacies that represent multiple tribes and bands, and Inspire Washington recognizes all of them. We express our deepest respect for and gratitude towards these original and current caretakers, the culture bearers of the region. As a cultural sector, we acknowledge our responsibility to establish and maintain relationships with these tribes and native peoples in support of tribal sovereignty and the inclusion of their voices in teaching art, heritage, natural science, and providing cultural programming. We pledge that our relationships will consist of mutual trust, respect, and reciprocity. I'm Manny Cawaling. Right now, I'm zooming from the central area of Seattle within the Duwamish lands that are part of the interconnected waterways and areas of the Coast Salish peoples. Before we get started, we feel it's always important to share a little bit about ourselves. We represent all of you in spaces where decisions are made and our public resources are being distributed. So it's fair to ask, who are these people? What do they understand about what do I do? Well, I want to assure you that my background is not law. And yes, I work in governmental affairs, but that's not how I started. Way back in high school, I discovered the joys of creativity. Every day I showed up before most of the students because us choir kids had to be there at 7:30 a.m. And even after all the sports teams had gone home after practice, us theater kids were still there late into the night rehearsing our shows and performing as well. Over my theater career, I've been a performer and a director, and also an arts educator, where most of my programs focus on developing the essential skills for young people within city and civic programs, with a real intense focus on working with kids from refugee and immigrant populations. For those of you that work in the heritage sector, I understand your work very well. I was a theater kid, so storytelling is something that I was good at. And storytelling, of course, is what museums do. I was the exhibit manager and developer of programs at the Wing Luke Asia Museum, exhibit programs. For those of you that run cultural nonprofits, I certainly understand the joy and of that work, how inspirational it is to serve your community. I also understand how challenging it is. For many years, I was the managing director of Langston Hughes Performing Art Institute. And for 10 years, because I love theater and youth, I was the executive director at Youth Theater Northwest. But now I'm honored to take my cultural experience into this space so that I can represent our broad cultural sector. And I love, of course, telling your stories in the spaces where your elected officials are distributing resources. My Washington State story, I'm a third generation Washingtonian born and raised in Seattle, but my family lives in King, Chelan, and Grant counties.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Jessi Wasson. I use she, her pronouns. Much like Manny, I'm also a theater kid. I started doing plays when I was 7 years old at my elementary school, but quickly discovered that backstage was where I belonged and became a stage manager. And out of college, got my equity card and started working as a stage manager in many of the theaters here in the Seattle area. I went to New York for a while, did that, but then came back and joined Manny at Youth Theater Northwest as the development director. So, those of you that write grants and raise money and talk to donors, I understand the very challenging nature of that, especially in our cultural nonprofits these days. I also spent some time in the heritage world at the Jewish Community Center, planning family events and holiday programs. And if you know anything about Jews, we have a holiday every month. So it's essentially planning a season of shows every year. But now I'm thrilled to be at Inspire Washington. I've been here for almost 3.5 years now. I grew up in East King County on Tiger Mountain, but now my family mostly lives in the beautiful Methow Valley and down in Walla Walla. Here's a little bit about what we're going to talk about today. I see some new faces, so that's wonderful. We're going to give you a little introduction as to what Inspire Washington is and does, and how we support all 39 counties of Washington state. And then we'll dive right in and talk about the legislative session and what happened there and how what was accomplished affects your cultural work. And then, yes, I will use the F word. We will talk about the federal government and the updates there, as there are many. And then we'll talk about the Cultural Access Program in Washington State and the opportunities that you can create in your local communities all the way across the state. And of course, we're here to listen. So we want to know what else we need to know about your work, about your region, and how we can support you in the next legislative session.
Inspire Washington opens doors to science, heritage, and the arts. We are a nonprofit. Here's our mission statement. I'll give you a few moments to read through that. Founded in 2019 with the merger of two nonprofits, Cultural Access Washington and the historic Washington State Arts Alliance. Inspire Washington is your cultural advocacy organization. We exist to serve every state community, from Spokane to Seattle, from Kennewick to Kitsap, from Wenatchee to Whatcom. We serve communities by supporting all of you, our cultural partners. You are the ones that inspire Washington communities every day in every region through your programs in science, heritage, and the arts. All of us share common values, passions, and beliefs. Your work, cultural work, adds uplifting value to community life, bringing joy, forging human connections, and inspiring tremendous social and economic impacts. Together, we are mighty. Inspire Washington's Advocacy Coalition combines and focuses the energy of thousands of people and organizations, businesses that provide science, heritage, and arts activities and experiences to every one of Washington's 281 cities and towns. What do we do year round and every day? Coalition building. We are connecting galleries in Friday Harbor with the Symphony in Yakima and music venues in downtown Spokane. We are building a big cultural team and directing our imagination on shared objectives. We're also coordinating with allies, other industries that care about a thriving cultural sector like tourism, education, rural development, and rural investment, to name a few. Advocacy ensures that someone is sticking up for you, for all of us, the cultural sector, and representing us within every space where decisions are made and our public resources are being distributed. Like with members of Congress when we advocated for pandemic relief, and in state government where we secured funds to extend investment in building for the arts. But what's next? What other resources need to be developed so that your work may thrive? Is it money? Laws and policy, or something else? We're here, we're listening, we want to know. We also know that you crave and rely on community within the industry. Our education programs provide networking and professional development opportunities. And Madeline, our advocacy coordinator, is always developing toolkits to make your advocacy and your communications work easier. We are committed to representing science, heritage, and arts organizations across Washington by spending more time listening, showing up in person and virtually, and working in towns and communities across the state. Thank you for joining us today.
So, when we talk about the cultural sector, or honestly, when we use the word culture in general, this is who we mean. We represent these three buckets of work at Inspire Washington. The first being science and technology, which includes nature conservancies, fish hatcheries, zoos, science innovation centers, and aquariums. Do we have any science partners here in our virtual room today? Go ahead and you raise your Zoom hand. We also have heritage, which includes historical and cultural heritage sites, humanities, and museums. How about heritage? Do I see any virtual heritage hands? Awesome, Kathy. That's great. And then we have the arts, which includes the visual arts, literature, music, theater, dance, spoken word, film, and non commercial radio. All right, arts, I know you're out there. Raise your virtual hands. All right, awesome.
As you can see, cultural advocacy is making impact in Washington state. Looking ahead, to champion greater support for your programming, we must continue to build greater awareness. Storytelling is one of the most important things we do with you and for you. Storytelling turns adversaries into allies, supporters into active champions. And when you join this effort, your stories may secure the resources you need and build greater awareness about what you do and why it matters to your community. Here's a story that I love to tell. Did you know that in Washington state, the arts, the cultural sector, the broad creative economy represents 9.52% of the state's GDP? That is really significant. If you take all the states in the nation and compare that same number, Washington state ranks number one. So therefore, if people come up to you and say, your program is wonderful, it's so nice to have it, but there are other things that are more necessary, this number refutes that. We represent thousands and thousands of jobs and are a financial pillar to our state's economy. That is not nice to have, that is critical. Also, what this number doesn't include is that every time you have one of your cultural events, of course, getting people out of their homes and into the main street, spending money, probably dropping by a restaurant afterwards, drives local economic prosperity. Join us as storytellers. Share these types of stories with your elected officials, businesses, local media donors, and the broader economy.
At Inspire Washington, we cannot do our work alone. Our partners are woven into the fabric of everything we do. We collaborate with organizations, government, and individuals, advocates every day. Here is a list of some of our partner organizations. They are nonprofit organizations just like you all across the state. We're really grateful to all of our partners here who help pay dues and support the work of statewide cultural advocacy. If you are so inclined, we would love to have you join as a member of Inspire Washington. We have individual memberships that start only at $50 a year or a pay what you will option. And for organizations, it's based on your budget size, and those dues start at only $100 a year. We would love to have you join us. Here's a list of some of our government partners. We have many great relationships with lawmakers at every level from city, county, state, and federal. We also work with many different state governments as well, or state agencies, as well as federal agencies on behalf of the cultural sector. And of course, our advocates, all of you. You are the ones that make this work possible. You participate in action alerts, you meet with your lawmakers, and of course, you produce the cultural work in your community that makes such a difference. Thank you so much for being here.
Advocacy exists to educate, to enlighten, to illuminate, and to inspire. And advocacy is working in Washington state. Cultural Coalition has delivered significant resources for our sector, but there's still more you need, so we aim to build up our ranks of advocates to have a larger and louder voice. So right now, I want to talk about advocacy so that you can help us bring more people into the work. Here's something that I hear all the time. Manny, I'd love to participate, but I really don't have the bandwidth to learn something new. And I'm here to challenge that notion. I believe advocacy is something you're excellent at and you're doing already. Advocacy is leadership. Every day you represent your cultural work, the communities you serve, the people that work for you, and the positive impact you're making. Advocacy is relationship building, like the outreach you're doing that draws a larger circle of supporters to your work. Advocacy is storytelling. Over 200 advocates from Pacific to Pend Oreille counties shared their stories of hardship and resilience with every member of the state legislature. This work inspired them to create the Working Washington Round 5 grant program. Originally, we asked for 25 million. We walked away with twice that much. Your stories matter. Okay, I know that there is an elephant in the room, though. Many leaders think that they're not allowed to advocate while running a nonprofit. And that's not exactly true. If you are a 501c3 tax exempt organization, there are certainly limitations for how much you may lobby, but advocacy is different and advocacy is allowed. So let's discuss the difference between the two. If you are lobbying, there are three key ingredients. You are communicating with the decision maker, that is the elected official or the staff member that is representing them at a meeting. You must be discussing existing or potential legislation, and legislation isn't an idea for funding. Legislation is very specific legal language and content that has been registered with the clerk of an elected chamber or council. You can spot legislation a mile away because it has very predictable names, like House Bill 1234 or Ordinance 5678. Last thing, if you are lobbying, you are urging that decision maker to make a vote for or against something. So, if you're doing all of that, well, then perhaps you're actually not a cultural worker anymore, but you're a lobbyist. But having a conversation about your program, the impact you're making, why the community needs the work that you do, and also ideas that you have for further support that will make your work succeed, that's advocacy, and that is allowed. Now, going deeper, the IRS does permit tax exempt organizations to lobby in limited amounts. It just cannot be a significant portion of your organizational work and therefore a large percentage of your annual budget. So, if you're a theater and you're spending more time in Washington, D.C. or in Olympia with Jesse and I, and very little time in your theater rehearsing the play, then perhaps you've crossed a line. But if you're just simply sharing more about your work, you're fine. Here's a good rule of thumb. Generally, nonprofits may lobby for issues like ballot initiatives, but not in candidate elections. Basically, issues and not endorsing elected officials. I hope I have convinced you about the importance of advocacy. In our representative government, advocacy is a critical part of the process. Your lawmakers are elected by the community and they are accountable to you. They want to hear from their voters to know what's important. There are many places where you may advocate for the resources that you need, like City Council, Chamber of Commerce, Economic Development, County Council, School Board, State Government, Federal Government, and more.
So now let's talk about where the bulk of our work happens. That's the state's legislative session. It's our nutcracker. It's our Super Bowl. It's the one time of year when lawmakers come to Olympia to create budgets and pass laws. There are 49 distinct geographic districts in Washington, and each district elects one senator and two representatives. These members work for you and show up in Olympia with your community's needs and interests in mind. The legislative session begins every year in January and runs through March or April. The odd years, like this year, are called bienniums because the legislature will create a 2 year budget. The even years are called the supplemental year because they won't be creating a new budget, just making adjustments to the one they made the year before. As you may have read, this was a very challenging year. We had a budget deficit to contend with, and many new lawmakers figuring out how to work together and efficiently accomplish things on behalf of all Washingtonians. So over the next couple slides, we're gonna talk about the legislative session. I'm gonna talk about bills, and then Manny's gonna talk about the budget. So just to kind of set the stage for these bills, every year there's about 2,500 bills that are introduced into the session, and only about 600 of them make it through the long process to become law. So we're just gonna talk about the ones that affect the cultural sector. And of course, there are a lot more that happen this session than the list that I'm about to show you. But here's just a little taste of what I think you guys are most top of mind and need to know. So the first one, ticketing legislation. For those of you who came to our Cultural Futures tour last year, you may remember that this was our big policy objective for this session. Over the summer, we interviewed many organizations about their ticketing issues and compiled great stories to share with members of the legislature. As you may recall, ticketing legislation has also been in the works for many years, mostly led by Representative Christine Reeves. This was her third year running the bill, so we felt it was really important to partner with her on this issue. But once the session got underway, boy, there was an awful lot of things going on, and unfortunately, this bill just did not make it through the long process. After its second hearing, it unfortunately died. Of course, we're really disappointed by this outcome, but we learned a lot and we will plan to introduce our own bill next session so that we can have a little bit more control and emphasis around its process. Uh, we're also working with the AG's office to help enforce some of the laws that are already in place around ticketing. And of course, we continue to work at the federal level because that would be the best case scenario. The best solution is to have a federal fix for all of these bots and scammers who are trying to take money away from venues and artists. So more to come on ticketing legislation. I'm going to introduce you to a new word today, Antio. Antio is a group of limited liability companies, and last year there was a court case between them as well as the state that decided that income generated from investments such as interest, dividends, and capital gains would be subject to Washington's B&O tax in certain situations. This is something that we were really concerned about because of the unintended consequences on nonprofits for foundations and endowments and things like that. So, we worked with the Department of Revenue to create an exemption for nonprofits. The legislature included Senate House Bill in 2081 as a clarification that nonprofits do not have to pay B&O tax on investment income. We're really thrilled about this. So therefore, this is something that you may not have even known was happening, but now you don't have to worry about it. There will still not be tax on endowments, foundations, trusts, and any investment income that nonprofits have. So we're really thrilled about that outcome. All right, so now we're going to turn our attention to our science partners and some of the science bills that passed this session. So, Senate Bill 5284 from Representative Berry and Senator Lovelet, also known as the Recycling Reform Act. This bill has also been in process for a number of years, and we're thrilled that it finally passed this year. What this bill does is require product producers like Amazon, who create a lot of packaging and things like that, it requires them to pay for curbside recycling for all Washingtonians. Currently, there are about 500,000 people who do not have curbside recycling, and mostly in our rural parts of the state. So we're thrilled that now they will, and it will be paid for by the product producers. So that's a great win for Washington. House Bill 1631 from Representative Nance designates the bull kelp forest as the state marine forest. This is a bill that was championed by our youth ocean advocates out of the Seattle Aquarium. We're really excited to support this bill. First of all, it's important to support our youth and our kids who are finding their way in the political process, but also being able to uplift something so important as the bull kelp, which our salmon and our orcas really rely on. We're really excited about that bill. For our heritage partners, we have two bills to talk about today, both from Representative Waters out of Clark County. House Bill 1651. So, in order to explain this, I'm going to give you a little history lesson. So, back in 2005, so 20 years ago, the legislature passed a different bill, House Bill 1386, which increased the local document recording fee that county courthouses take in from $2 to $5. And within that increase, $1 was intended to go to historic preservation and museums and historical societies. But over the years, counties stopped doing that essentially. So it got so bad that now the about the $9.5 million that is collected every year from that $1 document fee, about half of it had only been going out to historical museums and societies. So this bill would clarify that those county courthouses would need to spend that money annually so that the entire 9.5 million gets distributed every year to history and local historical societies. Unfortunately, this bill did not pass due to like a little wording technicality, and then time is always an issue in the session. But we've been already in conversation with Representative Waters. He's really excited about running this bill again next year. He feels confident that he has fixed some of the language wording that was kind of tripping them up within the session. So we feel confident that this bill will pass next session. We're really excited about that. House Bill 1731 regarding unclaimed property held by a museum or historical society. And the word property is used pretty loosely. This also can just mean a historic item like, an iron or a photograph or some sort of item that a museum would take into their collection. Previous to this bill, the only way that a historical society or museum could legally contact someone to say, hey, we have this item, you might want it, or we'll just keep it in our collection. The only way they could legally contact those people was through newspaper articles and postings on a telephone pole or other really kind of old methods like that. Of course, I'm so now we have the legal um, path so that they can send emails, they can do calls, they can do postings on, virtual sites and things like that. So that is a great support for our heritage partners. Within the arts, Senate Bill 5486 from Senator Orwell concerning open motion picture captioning. This is a great accessibility win for Washington State. As of January 1, this law requires all movie theater companies that operate 5 or more venues in Washington to offer screenings with open captioning. So when you go to the movie theater, you can see the dialogue on the screen. There's some flexibility, of course, around which screenings they do it, but they have to do it. I think it's one for every 5 or 6 screenings they offer has to have open caption, and they have to publicize it and all that kind of stuff. So I know my parents are really excited about this, and I hope other folks across Washington are as well. Any questions about any of these bills, or perhaps any other bills that may be on your mind that we didn't cover today? No? Okay, great. I'm going to turn it over to you.
All right, so now we're going to talk about the budget. It was an incredibly difficult budget year for our state. I'm sure you heard or saw all of the news articles about that. Over the 105-day session, the legislature had the daunting task of bridging a $16 billion deficit that was projected over the next 4 years at current levels of spending. So, how did things get so bad? Well, we have a limited and backwards tax system in Washington, skyrocketing expenses due to inflation, cost of living increases for state employees, the depletion of COVID funding from the federal government, first wave of new federal cuts from the presidential administration, much bigger budget overall due to larger investments in education, healthcare, social services, and climate initiatives. Some would say that our tax revenues are growing and the state has a spending problem. For Jessi and I, we aren't members of the legislature, so we don't have to decide on that. What we care about is cultural investment. And I will say, with strong confidence, is that cultural investment is a tiny, tiny part of the state budget. So we are not part of the problem, and our investments matter. Anyway, that's a long list of problems. Finding a pathway forward was incredibly difficult because of an impasse. Our Democrat-controlled legislature wanted to pass laws to secure $20 billion of new revenues to bridge the gap, but the governor pledged to veto most of their proposals for new taxes. That was a lot of drama, but in the end, the legislature compromised with $9 billion of new revenues. On April 27th, they passed their biennium 2-year budget totaling nearly $78 billion, and the budget was signed by the governor last week. This budget takes effect July 1st and will lead state investments through the end of June of 2027. There will be an opportunity to make some minor budget adjustments in next year's supplemental budget year, so we are preparing for that. Right now, I will provide a quick overview of cultural funding to let you know what to expect. Let's start with ArtsWA and the funds that matter most to our arts partners. There will be a reduction of $150,000 per year to their overall grants program. The staff knows that these are the funds you care about most, so they are assessing how to minimize the impact on their grantees while maintaining their statewide reach. So more on that from them later. Additionally, we all know that state funding was woefully inadequate to begin with, and many applications from many cultural partners, were being rejected because of a lack of funding. So it is very disappointing that we've taken a step backwards, but we are all grateful that the budget cuts weren't as bad as we imagined as they were, or as bad as they were during the Great Recession. To minimize deeper cuts to their grants program, ArtsWA will decrease internal spending on things like operations, professional development, supplies, services, and travel. ArtsWA's staff remains whole. You may have read news about furloughs and things like that, but when the budget was passed, ArtsWA and the state will not have furloughs, and they, like many other state employees, will receive their COLA increases that were delayed during the pandemic at the levels negotiated through a collective bargaining agreement. And here's some good news that we can count on with ArtsWA. The replacement of Washington State statue in Statuary Hall in the nation's capital That work will continue with ArtsWA's leadership so that we may honor Washington State hero Billy Frank Jr. Also, after 2 years of planning and startup, ArtsWA will continue the implementation of their new CRM system. The popular Certified Creative Districts program has same level funding, and in this hard budget year, same level funding was a real win. And the program will still provide grants for small capital projects. The newer Tribal Cultural Affairs program receives same level funding, and they will continue to provide $500,000 in grants annually to their tribal partners. And a big win, full funding for Building for the Arts program. That was $18 million for 38 capital projects at cultural facilities statewide. All right, moving on now to the funding that's annually provided to our two state historical societies. And we will start with the Washington State Historical Society, which is commonly known as the Washington State History Museum, located in Tacoma. In the last biennium, their total appropriation was 10.8 million, whereas this year the total appropriation is 11.1 million. Now that may be a tad more money, but factoring in the cost of living increases for state employees, their organizational capacity did decrease a bit. Considering their legislative objective was same level maintenance funding, we all consider this outcome to be not so bad. Here's a win that we can all celebrate. Their capital program, the Heritage Capital Projects, which supports facilities that provide public access to history. This program was fully funded for the biennium. That is 19 projects in 11 counties with a total investment of $10 million. So congratulations to Columbia Theater with their Centennial Capital Project and the Wenatchee Valley Museum with their exterior restoration project, just to name a few. Okay, moving on to the Eastern Washington State Historical Society, commonly known as the Northwest Museum of Arts and Culture in beautiful Spokane. They did pretty well this session. They maintained level funding at 9.6 million with new money for one art curator and a pre-design study for potential gallery expansion sometime in the future. So they did pretty well. Now moving to our other cultural partner, the Department of Archaeology and Historic Preservation, DAP. Their budget for the biennium was 11.2 million. Now that is a bit down from the last biennium, so they'll be tightening their belts, and more from them on how that will affect their program. But it's also important and worrisome to note in today's climate that $2.5 million of their budget comes from federal funding. So we'll need to see how that plays out. And of course, this matters to our heritage and preservation partners. This agency will be in trouble if funds are cut. So advocates, stay tuned. Their Main Street program, so popular across Washington, receives same level funding at $700,000. So our partners at Washington Trust will have the resources they need to continue this great work since they partner with DAP on that. And here's something exciting. $125,000 was provided solely for the implementation of the Black Historic Site Survey project. DAP also runs the Historic Capital Grant Program, and that was renewed with same level funding. So that's 9.3 million for project grants supporting Washington's historic courthouses, barns, cemeteries, and theaters. Okay, I'll close out with the Department of Commerce. The Department of Commerce is the administrator for the Local Capital Projects Program, which is sponsored capital projects from members of the legislature. We are thrilled that there were over 27 projects for cultural orgs across the state. In the next biennium, we hope to see your organization on this list. If you've never heard about how your representatives or senator can sponsor a capital project in the tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars, please speak with Jessi. She's our expert on this program. She can coach you to get on that list. Are
I
there
also
any questions? Yeah.
I also wanted to call out that our science partners received some capital grant funding this year through the Department of Commerce as well as through Building for the Arts. So
Yes.
really excited for our science partners in there as well. Any questions about budget items? These budget items? Okay.
Okay. Not a great year, but everyone, but we got through it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we were thrilled that the governor signed the budget on May 20th. We were kind of holding our breath there. We weren't really sure if he was going to end up vetoing, but he did, which is great. However, due to the fact that about 28% of our state budget comes from the federal government, and that we feel there may be some adjustments coming to the federal government budget, we feel there may be an opportunity for a potential special session in the fall. The federal government will come out with their annual budget, usually in September or October. So there may be another time for the legislature to come back to make adjustments to that budget later on. So we'll just kind of have to see. But in the meantime, at Inspire Washington, we are gearing up for next session and opportunities for our cultural partners. As Manny said, we will, of course, ask for more money. We always do that. That is a guarantee from us. We will be sure to continue to push for that. But we also want to talk about some potential policy ideas for next year with all of you today, and just to see how these things excite you or land with you in your communities. Policies are a great way to make your work easier and your life a little easier through policy without costing the state anything. So we have some ideas about these today, and we'd love to share them with you and hear maybe any potential ideas you have. So first, ticketing legislation. Yes, we will continue to do that. We probably don't need to talk too much about that today, so you can count on that for sure.
All right. Here's something that we have been hearing from our partners for a little while. This issue is brewing. So I want to talk about the overtime threshold that the state sets that determines whether an employee is an exempt employee versus a non-exempt employee. And that was a lot of really complicated words. So raise your hand if you know what I'm talking about. Okay. Some of you do, some of you don't. Let me unpack this a little bit. Don't worry, we're not going to dig too deep. I just want to make sure you know what it is. All right. So um, as we all know in our businesses, we have positions in our organizations that we consider to be professional positions and some that we consider to be more of the hourly positions, right? Like our directors versus maybe our front of house staff, right? In the state of Washington, there is an employment law that sets a payment threshold that basically says anyone above the payment threshold, if they're paid this amount or more, they are an exempt position. They are exempt from some of the employment laws like overtime. They are salaried employees. But everyone underneath the payment threshold is an hourly employee. And that payment threshold has been ramping up on a steep curve over the last several years. In fact, in 2028, the payment overtime threshold will be $93,000. So what does that mean in 2028? It means that everyone above that is paid $93,000 or above is a salaried employee. They have objectives. They have to get things done no matter what it takes. We all understand that, but everyone below would be eligible for nonprofits. So and in our cultural sector, since our wages are sadly depressed, there are many or positions that we all consider to be professional positions that would be subject to overtime, like we know that a lot of our development staff and fundraising staff gets paid below the payment threshold. Well, what happens Gala Week when you have a big fundraising event? A lot of organizations manage that with care and thought, and they provide flex time or comp time. They work really busy one month, they work less the next month, but they would no longer to have you would no longer have that flexibility. Now, this is a very touchy subject. We have to be really thoughtful about this because we are talking about our cultural workforce that deserve to be treated fairly, but we're also talking about organizations that have limited financial bandwidth to actually keep up with the overtime threshold. What do we do? Well, we don't really have an answer for that yet, but we have been hearing from our partners, and we feel this is a conversation that we have to start internally, and also start talking to the legislature to figure out what a solution could be to make sure that our employees are treated fairly, but we don't put our cultural nonprofits at risk. We may not, I don't, we may not, probably not be able to solve this by the next session, but we really want to work ahead of that 2028 deadline. Are there any thoughts about that or questions? Okay, this is a good thing, right? This is something we should be focused on. Okay, all right. Well, we'll keep chatting. So more on that in the future.
Okay, another issue that we heard a lot about last session or last year when we were on tour is space, especially in our rural places. There is not enough space for rehearsals, for performances, for storage, for making things, for studio space, all that kind of stuff. There's not enough space for that. So we were started to brainstorm with some of our partners, and what if we could create an incentive that the state would create to encourage those empty office buildings and perhaps those empty churches who maybe only are full a few days a week, um, to open their doors to a discounted price to nonprofit organizations and other artists. So maybe there would be a tax break on their property taxes or something like that. Some sort of incentive to help, because we know that oftentimes the real barrier is like for churches, there's someone that just doesn't want to come down at 6 o'clock on a Wednesday evening to open the door so that the music band can rehearse for 3 hours and come back at 10 o'clock to lock it up, right? That's just not appealing to them. But if there was an incentive that would help that, sweeten that deal for them a little bit, then this might be a great option for nonprofits. How do folks feel about that? Yeah, some nodding heads. Okay, great. More to come on that.
We all know that COVID has changed people's behaviors, right? And we specifically see this in our cultural work with volunteers. Many of our non cultural organizations need volunteers to get the basic work done. In fact, in some of our fields within the cultural sector, like the heritage field, there are volunteers are the only way to get things done. We have over 800 museums and historical societies in Washington State, and the vast majority of them are volunteer driven. Um, we want to so one of the ideas we have is there a way that the state can incentivize or promote volunteerism in Washington State, especially around America 250? The semi-quincentennial is next year. Maybe this is a great way to kind of inspire civic pride and get people to be investing with time and energy in the organizations in their communities. So this is something that we've been thinking about. We also know that this is not just about serving the organizations, it's also about providing healthy outlets for people in communities like seniors, to be engaged in the fabric of their community. It promotes mental health for seniors to have social contacts and for them to have a regular schedule. So we see this kind of addresses a lot of things, and this is really has moved up our list because of the recent cancellation of the AmeriCorps program. Many of our cultural nonprofits have relied on AmeriCorps staff, um, uh, at little to no cost to their organizations. So, volunteerism, how about that? Is that something that is useful to you guys? Okay, I see some nodding heads.
Mhm,
Great. We'll
mhm.
talk more
Okay,
about that later.
cool. I just want to pause here. Are there any other ideas or thoughts that folks have that they want to share with us today, or any ideas you think that we should start percolating on?
We work really hard to come up with a list that had things that spoke to organizations of all sizes. I mean, uh, like the space incentive, we know that lots of smaller groups, like Heather with your music group, we heard from so many people looking for just music rehearsal space. Okay.
Right. Okay, great. Okay, we're going to take a deep breath now and talk about the federal government.
All right. As we get started, I just really want to recognize that there have been so many actions and words coming from the federal government that have been creating a lot of anxiety and outrage, lots of feelings, and a lot of hurt and chaos and confusion, and that's all real, right? I know that it's challenging for Jessi and I because our job, we focus on the government. We pay a lot of attention to the government all day long. And there's a wide range of issues out there right now. Every day, there's like 10 more. And it seems really overwhelming. Um, and in Inspire Washington, we are people first. So there's a lot of issues that we care about, that you care about. Um, but there's also the more narrow and significant issues that affect our cultural sector work. And that's what we're going to focus on today. But I just want to recognize that there's a whole universe of stuff going on right now with the federal government that we may not be talking about today. And it may really weigh heavily on your heart, and it matters, of course. Um, our federal government is powerful. In the world of business, their influence can make or break an industry. Their financial investment can create new jobs, drive higher engagement, and spur significant business growth. But also, when they come against a sector or an industry, it's harmful and it creates new challenges. Um, so let's get started. I'm a theater person. What's really important for me before I get into issues and context as I need to understand who are the cast, who are the players on stage, right? So I just want to do a quick little civics lesson so we can start this conversation. The United States government has three branches, and some people call these equal branches. But if you actually really look at what they do, they all have different levels of outsized power. Let's start with the executive branch. The executive branch is the president. It's also the administration, his cabinet, the people he hires and appoints to do the work. Their role is to execute the work of the federal government. They're kind of essentially like the executive director or the CEO. They have to administrate all the things. Now, where are all these things coming from? The legislative branch. The legislative branch is where things originate. The legislative branch is as Congress. It is made up of two chambers, the House and the Senate. There's two of them because that tension is supposed to create a lot of conversation and also allows a lot of opportunities for representation. We are most directly represented at the local level by Congress because we elect people from our cities and our towns, our neighbors. What are they doing? Well, Congress is appropriating funding. They are the keepers of the purse. They're the ones that create the budget. And when they approve budgets, the budgets become law and they authorize the spending. And that is what the executive branch is supposed to execute. They also pass bills to create new laws to govern American society. Um, so what else is needed? The judiciary, right? We're a nation of laws. So the judiciary is there to clarify what the law is. They're the go-to when there's questions or ambiguity in a law. And that's why and today, right now, the conflict between all of this and how it was designed to work is really taking hold of our American process.
So today, like Manny said, there's a lot going on in the government right now, especially at the federal level, but we are going to focus on just the cultural agencies that we work with. So this is the Institute of Museum and Library Services. This is the National Endowment for the Humanities and the National Endowment for the Arts. So we're going to be talking about the effects that have come upon those three federal agencies. So that comes from executive orders, right? So right now, there's been a lot of executive orders that have come into play. In fact, this president has issued more in his first 100 days than any other president in history. So it's been, of course, a lot to keep up on. So I'm going to go through all of those today. I'm going to start with the ones that affect programs specifically, and then I'll go in and talk about the ones that affect funding. Okay. So, one of the first things that the president did was to eliminate the President's Committee on the Arts and Humanities. This is an advisory committee that works directly with the White House and the three cultural agencies that I mentioned, as well as some other federal partners and folks in the private sector. They work to advance a wide range of policy objectives to support the arts and humanities. So has now been canceled. The Smithsonian, the president issued an executive order that directed the Smithsonian Institute to prohibit additional funding for programs that advance divisive narratives and improper ideology. The order also requested that the Board of Regents consider reinstating public monuments and memorials and things that have since been removed since 2020. We feel that some of the museums focusing on our minority communities within the Smithsonian family may be adversely affected by this executive order. Nothing has happened yet as far as we know, but we are definitely going to be keeping tabs on that. The Kennedy Center, which is our nation's cultural center for our whole country, and change from tradition, the president appointed himself as the chair of the Kennedy Center and terminated many of the current board members' contracts and replaced them with members of his inner circle. This prompted many groups to cancel contracts with the Kennedy Center due to the changes in the center's DEI and gender-related executive orders. I do have some good news within ticketing. The president issued an executive order to direct the Federal Trade Commission to work with the AG's office to ensure that laws are enforced in the concert and entertainment industry. It aims to uphold price transparency and also calls for more rigorous enforcement of the Bots Act that was passed in 2016, which allows the FTC to take further action against individuals and companies that use bots and scammers and fake websites to buy concert tickets and other show tickets and things like that, and then resell them for astronomical prices. So this is a good thing, but we have yet to see how this plays out with current laws that are in place. This is, of course, an executive order. It's not the same thing as a law. There's also an awful lot of bills floating around within the federal government that would make a big and positive impact on ticketing. So we've yet to kind of see how all of these things play out together. Side note, unrelated to the executive order, but the FTC did recently come out with new requirements for all-in pricing. So what this means is now anyone who sells tickets, whether it's, for a museum or for a show, you now have to show all-in pricing. And what that means is, let's say you sell tickets for $15 and you advertise that, but once a person goes to the website and buys the ticket, there's also $3 of fees, and therefore your ticket price is really $18. So this new requirements makes it essential for a business to say, okay, our tickets are $18. That is all in pricing. That's what everything is. So that change was just made on May 25th. There's a lot of resources for organizations and businesses on the FTC's website to learn how to do this properly. It's also, a soft, deadline kind of a thing. They're not going to come after you today. But I would suggest if you do sell tickets at your business, please take a look at those and make sure you're following the regulations. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about the executive orders that did cut funding. Before I get started on this, just out of curiosity, I know we have some folks already, but people who have lost grants, either from the IMLS, the NEH, or the NEA. I know, yeah, I know the Children's Theater did, Carissa. Yeah, anyone else that I may be missing? Kathy, you guys did as well. Okay, good to know. All right, so let's talk about some of these. Going back a little bit to Manny's previous slide, these executive orders and the information I'm about to share really is executive branch and judiciary branch. There's not a whole lot of place for the legislature and Congress within this work, or they did not create this work, is what I'm saying. This is really between executive and judiciary. So we'll talk about how our Congress people can play into this now. All right, so the first executive order directly impacting our cultural agencies was the executive order eliminating all DEI and gender ideology programs and initiatives. This included cutting the programs and departments within the federal government as well as federal funded programs. There are a few lawsuits out there related to this. The one that has gone the furthest is with the ACLU and the Theater Communications Group. They sued the NEA and the U.S. District Court of Rhode Island. The outcome is still a little uncertain. Essentially, what happened is the court said, NEA, we believe that what you're doing violates the First Amendment, but we also recognize that you just got this executive order and are still figuring out how you are reacting to it. So let's wait and see how that plays out. So the NEA came out with their statement about the gender ideology and DEI requirements, and so now the court case is back in session, so to speak, and they'll figure out if that still violates First Amendment. So more to come on that. For IMLS, on May 2nd, back to the NEA, the president released his proposed budget. Hundreds of organizations across the country then received notices that their NEA grants had been terminated, including Inspire Washington's grants for arts education research. If you did get a letter, I hope you submitted an appeal and spoke to your member of Congress. That's the best way to get the word out about that. There are now lawsuits related to this that have been filed. Nothing's been scheduled yet, but more to come on that, as now it is in the hands of the courts. For IMLS, at the end of March, the president issued an executive order to dismantle IMLS and 7 other federal agencies. He appointed a new acting director who then fired all members of the IMLS board and terminated 85% of the staff. And there are now about 12 employees remaining, as we know. This is beyond devastating for Washington State, as you can probably imagine, for our museums as well as our libraries. This amounts to a loss of about $4 million to Washington State. Unfortunately, many of the staff to our state library has now been laid off. Um, there has been a few lawsuits related to this. One by 21 AG's offices all came together from all over the country, including ours, Nick Brown. They filed a lawsuit against this and won. So some funding has been reinstated to the state library, but unfortunately, those people had already been let go. So they're kind of at an impasse right now and are trying to figure out how to mitigate some of that and bring back. But there's also huge cuts to the library at the state level as well. So more to come on that. But it is unfortunately a sad situation for our state library. The other lawsuit that was filed is the American Library Association. On May 1st, the U.S. District Court of Columbia granted a temporary restraining order against the executive branch. Essentially, what they said is, executive branch, we are putting a restraining order on you. You cannot touch IMLS until we figure out what you're doing is actually legal. Because all of these agencies, IMLS, NEA, and NEH, all have statutory requirements as mandated by Congress, the things that they have to do as mandated by Congress. And if the executive branch takes away a lot of that money and they cannot fulfill those requirements, well, then that's illegal. So there's now a restraining order so that the courts can go in and figure out if the executive order is actually legal. So more to come on that as well. For our partners at National Endowment for the Humanities, in early April, the Humanities Councils and NEH grantees across the country started receiving emails that their funding and grants would be cut or terminated. More than 1,200 grants were cut across within this pool of emails. In Washington, this includes about $6 million to Humanities Washington and grants to 70 other organizations across our state. This cut would mean, if this it stayed this way, the cut would mean a loss of popular programs like the Primetime Family Reading Program, the Speakers Bureau, the Washington State Poet Laureate, and Public Humanities Fellows, and many other grants to organizations. On May 2nd, a lawsuit was filed for similar reasons, that they don't believe that they can fulfill their statutory requirements as mandated by Congress. So now there's a lawsuit. If you're interested, I highly encourage you reading that document about the lawsuit that was filed. They go into a lot of detail about how Doge went in and did what they did. It's really interesting. It's also public information. So more to come on that. The lawsuit has been filed, but they have not yet had their day in court. So we'll have to wait and see how that plays out. I'm going to pause there. Are there any questions about any of that? Go ahead and unmute yourself or raise your hand. Okay. Um, so of course that was a lot of downer information, and we acknowledge that and don't want to leave you all sad and depressed today. So the next thing we're going to do is talk about the ways in which we can fight back. So in the last couple slides, I predominantly talked about our executive branch and our judiciary branch, but we have our legislative branch. They are our voices in Congress. So we're going to talk about how we can energize them to help us fight back with these. So what can we do, Manny? What are
All right, Congress. Washington State has 10 congressional districts. Every district elects a representative, and of course, the whole state elects 2 senators. So I want to talk about our members of Congress, and I'll provide a little insight and also just concrete things and opportunities with each of them. Um, so when I look at our list of Congress, I kind of think of them in 3 key buckets, all right? Bucket one, these are the members that represent the state who have been historically supportive of arts and culture. And we can measure that because we keep a report card and we see and monitor their votes. So who's in the A to A plus means, which means that they do all the right things. They've joined the right caucuses that support arts and culture, and they support and vote for NEA and NEH funding. Well, those would be our congressional representatives that are Representative Del Benny, Representative Rick Larson, Representative Pramila Jayapal, Representative Schreier, Representative Smith, and Representative Strickland, right? They have supported us in the past. Here's something that I hear though. A lot of people tell me, oh, I don't have to reach out to them because they're always so good about this stuff. I want to remind you I'm hopeful for that too, but I want to remind you that for them in their job, everything is on fire. There's lots of things that they care about, right? So we still need to reach out to them to remind them that these investments matter on top of the 50 other things that are on fire right now in Washington, D.C. So it's still really, really, really important to reach out to those members. Now, one person I'm not even putting in a bucket and I just want to call them out is Representative Emily Randall, freshman to Congress. So I don't have a report card for her yet, but I will tell you, super supportive of arts and culture in her previous job in our state legislature. So I'm very optimistic about Representative Randall's support of our programs. And also, we had a really great meeting with her legislative aide when we were in DC in February. I think it's especially important to reach out to her because she's learning a whole new job. Like she kind of knew where the cultural investments were in the state government work, but in the federal government work, this is all new. So really important to reach out um, so that she understands that these where the investments are and what's important. And a lot of gratitude to Representative Derek Kilmer, who represented that district for a long time and was always on top of supporting arts and culture. All right, second bucket. The second bucket are the members, congressional members for Washington State that are part of the majority party, the GOP. Those would be Representative Dan Newhouse, that is Central Washington, top to bottom, and our other freshman, Representative Michael Baumgartner. So these two members are Republicans. The Republicans have control of Congress, right? Republican Party holds the presidency. So these are members that have more influence, that are being elevated in positions on committees, are and therefore are the ones that we really need to be reaching out to. We need the majority party of our nation to push back on the president on all of these drastic cuts because these cuts in cultural sector as well as all the other things are really impacting life in their local communities. These two members are a little bit uniquely different, and I'll tell you why. Representative Dan Newhouse is on the Appropriation Committee. That's the Budget Committee. It is critical that that committee push back with congressional authority on the funding cuts, as well as appropriates money in the next fiscal year. I know all the talk right now is about the current fiscal year and the grant that was cut, and that is all awful. But here's the thing right now, we have strong ground to stand on because the funds were appropriated by Congress for this fiscal year. We need them to appropriate funds for next year because if Congress doesn't, then we have no ground to stand on. So, Representative Dan Newhouse, a key target for all of us um, in Washington State. For Representative Michael Baumgartner, still a part of the majority party, but he's not on a key budget committee. He's not on appropriations. But he's still in the majority, and he's really enthusiastic to be in DC, and I'm certain he's probably making a lot of friends. Okay, now I know a bunch of you are not. If you live in those districts, you know what to do. And Jess is going to talk about action alerts and how you can reach out to them. If you don't live in those districts, think about who you know that lives in District 4 and 5. We need constituents to be reaching out to the lawmakers, okay? All right, now, third bucket, kind of somebody who just is stands alone. Representative Marie Gluesenkamp Perez, that represents Southwest Washington. She is a member of the Democratic Party. She caucuses with that group, but she's not a rank and file voter recently. And I will tell you, she did not vote for NEA and NEH funding last year. At a recent meeting that we had with her legislative aide in DC, we certainly held her office accountable and shared all the great programs that took place in her district. Uh, uh, because the rest of Congress, the majority of Congress, supported that funding. So this is an area where we could pick up a vote. Um, if you live in Southwest Washington, or if you have friends there, please have them advocate to Marie Gluesenkamp Perez. And of course, we have our senators, and they're doing a great job. They are really outraged by all these cuts, especially Senator Murray, because Senator Murray was the chair of the Appropriations Committee up until last year. That is the highest Senate budget position. Until the Republicans took control of the Senate. And now she's the ranking member, so that makes her the most powerful member of the committee for the minority party. So imagine how angry Murray is. She led the process to appropriate all these funds that now the president is pulling back. So our senators are doing a good job, but they need to consistently. This is exhausting work, so they need to keep feeling the support from their constituents. Last thing I want to say, we are doing this work for Washington because these are the members of Congress that care about what we think. And we are part of a network of state cultural and arts advocacy organizations, like our great partners at Texans for the Arts and Californians for the Arts. So they're doing their part with their lawmakers. We need to do our part with ours. Are there any questions or thoughts about any of our members of Congress or anything that you have to share? Okay, well, you can
Okay.
always reach out. I'm always happy to nerd out and talk about our members of Congress.
All right, so here is the list of what we can do, friends. So on the left side in the black is what Inspire Washington is doing as your state's cultural advocacy organization. And then on the other side in the orange is what you as advocates how you guys can echo and support that work in your individual districts. So we're going to start with action alerts. Manny mentioned this before. This is the easiest and most effective way for you to communicate to your lawmakers on a regular basis. I'm sure a lot of you have seen them. They look like this. They're from our Inspiration League, which is our online advocacy platform. You can sign up to get alerts on inspirationleague.org. This is the one we sent out for the National Endowment for the Humanities a little bit ago. So it describes what's going on, what the issue is, what the impacts would be locally. And then as you'll see down there in the bottom right, there's a pre-written letter to your lawmaker that Manny and I write. This is completely editable. We highly encourage you adding a sentence or two about you personally and your community and how this will impact you. You can also delete what you don't agree with or add further language if you would like. This is democracy. It's totally up to you. And then you just fill out the information and then it is sent to the representative and the senator based on where you live. So this is an easy way to participate in advocacy. It takes only 2 minutes to fill these out. Please fill them out every time you get them and then send them to 5 other friends, particularly those who live in Central and Eastern Washington.
All right. So what are we doing? Well, we are in constant conversation with our congressional members. Just this week, we had an in-person meeting with Representative Jayapal. We brought constituents to that meeting. We had a limited number of slots that we could bring, but we really focused on the executive orders and people most impacted. We're in constant conversation, and we do that in the district. You don't have to go to DC. One thing that a lot of people don't know is that members of Congress have multiple offices. In Washington, D.C., they have their legislative staff, and those are the people that are really focused on the legislative activity, the inner workings of how government happens and how our elected members represent us. But here in the state, they have district offices, and the role of the district office is to meet with constituents, gather feedback, and send all the stories and information over to DC so that they can act on it. So What can you do? Reach out to your district staff. This is would bring value to your work in a multiple of different ways, but reach out to your district staff. Invite them over to an event you're doing. Have coffee with them, right? Just make sure that they know what's going on with you, how the actions of the government are affecting your work. Also, district staff is a great resource for grant information, or if you're having problems navigating the federal system, that is their job to help you. So, for a multitude of reasons, it's really great to be in regular contact and a first name basis, friends with your district office.
So our job at Inspire Washington is to educate and share information with the public, with our advocates. So we put out an awful lot of emails, social media stuff. We do, obviously cultural futures virtually as well as in person. Please help us by echoing that sentiment to your friends and your family and your network. We need more people involved in this effort. Please forward our emails. Please encourage folks to attend. The more people we get involved in this process, the better.
For us at Inspire Washington, we will always work with whoever is elected and do our best to inspire them to support cultural work. But wouldn't it be just great if we started with people that already supported cultural work? So, anyway, we care about who gets elected. We walk a really fine line, though. We cannot endorse candidates, but we make sure that key candidates that have a real chance of representing the communities, that they are educated about cultural issues. And also, we want to make sure that the public that cares about cultural programs understands the platforms that these candidates have. So, what do? We hold candidate forums. There are 281 cities and towns, so we certainly cannot do one for all the communities, but we create resources. We hold candidate forums. We also create resources for local advocates to hold their own candidate forums. So that's what you can do. This year is a significant year for local elections. So no matter where you live in Washington State, consider all the different ways that you can have a conversation with your candidates about, the support they would provide or how for science, heritage, and the arts. You can do this in a variety of ways. You can do a survey. Maybe you don't want to do an in-person event. Maybe that's too much for you. You could do a survey. You could also do a candidate form. And you can do this legally. Of course, you cannot, nonprofits cannot endorse candidates. If you're a commercial creative business, you have more bandwidth, but nonprofits cannot endorse candidates. But you can have voter education events where you are asking questions, they share their responses, and the audience decides what it means to them. So there's a lot of ways that you could do this within the boundaries of the rules that are set up for tax exempt organizations. Reach out to us. All of our resources are on our website, inspirationleague.org, or reach out to us. We're happy to talk more.
So all of the things that we just mentioned are part of our regular kind of playbook of ways that we work within this space, and particularly in the federal government. But things are a little different these days. We have to create a new playbook for the way that this government is behaving. So we've started to come up with a list of new areas of work that not only that we at Inspire Washington are doing, but also our sister organizations in Massachusetts and Louisiana and all the other states. So these are some of the areas that we are starting to further our work. So media attention. This is a big area that we've really engaged in is we need to get more people aware of these cuts that are happening. The media cycle is crazy, right? There's constantly new information all the time and it's hard to keep up. So our stories about cuts to NEA grants and IMLS grants often just kind of get mixed up in the wash. Well, we need more attention. We need a constant flow of that to ensure that people really understand what is happening because of those executive orders. So Inspire Washington, we have been working with an awful lot of different news articles and radio and television even and all that kind of stuff to try to get the word out. And we highly encourage you to engage in this work as well in your local community. Maybe an article is too much, but you can certainly submit an op-ed. That is a great way. Media also really needs content right now, so they encourage that. We've created a template for you to write your own op-ed that you can submit to your local newspaper. It has a lot of great information just about what's going on, and then a section for you to add in your own flavor, add in your own point of view for your community. So please highly take a look at that, and we highly encourage you to do so.
One thing that I've heard a lot from the many people that I've been reaching out to and saying, what should we be doing right now? A common thread has been that history has shown us that when government or power goes astray, it is mass protest that gets government back in line. So there are so many cuts and threats coming from the federal government, and there are a lot of enraged people. So we can imagine, and we're seeing it already, that there will be a lot more protests and rallies in the future. So we need to participate in those. Absolutely, we should show up and support and clap when speakers get up to the microphone and talk about the broad issues that we all care about. But let's go even further. If there's a rally in your community, I suggest that you reach out to them and share a little bit that they may not know about the effect on freedom of expression, right? Their local library, what may be happening there if hours are cut or potentially the library is closed, and the effect on their arts and cultural organizations. Um, get on that, ask to be to get your time on stage. And I'm certain in Washington State, if you got up and talked about that amazing uplifting way that you serve and spur the creativity of young people, that you are going to feel the love and the warmth of the audience. We have to be part of the conversation, right? So we're really trying to reach out to organizers. It's very different. It's not the normal allies that we've been working with, and they're also new, right? This is an emerging area in space, but we want you to do the same thing too. And of course, attend those rallies, hold cultural signs in every which way that you are comfortable with, in making sure that we are part of the conversation, and the broad public that is outraged by what's happening, that they know that cultural sector has been affected too.
I will say, as a former stage manager, I never thought that lawsuits would be an area of work that I would have to start working in. But here we are. It is a new day. So, yes, Inspire Washington, we are participating and learning about these lawsuits. We're engaging with lawyers and our state agencies and working with the AG's office on these lawsuits. So, you are more than welcome to learn about that on your own. But honestly, the best thing that you can do to support this area of work is just make sure that we know that your federal grant was cut and help share stories about that, because then we can pass those off to the lawyers and we can pass those off to the folks that will make that turn that work around. So that is kind of the main area of the work in terms of working in the courts.
Inspire Washington, of course, believes in allyship. So we work with a lot of people, and we're all banging our heads right now. So here's just a quick review of the many spaces and groups that we convene with. We convene with organizations similar to ours in every state. We do that at the national level. There's several groups where all of us gather. We also convene with the Western states because a lot of our issues are very, very similar. And it's also just a little bit easier to wrap our brains around because it's a group of 13 organizations. Um, and then there's also, of course, in the arts and cultural sector, there are all of the service organizations like League of American Orchestras or Alliance of American Museums. So there's also a group where we convene there, and we are all racking our brains on where's the leverage, what does collective action look like. So we're doing all that, but we also know that we have to go beyond that normal group of places where we chat, collaborate, and convene. For example, we took a meeting with ACLU Washington, just to understand more, for them to understand who we are and the threats that we're facing and our partners are facing. And we keep doing more and more of this, asking ourselves, who else could we be talking to? Where's there's a possibility for collaboration, and where are there some shared experiences? So we also encourage you to do the same thing. To be figuring out where your allies are. And if there's like an ally that you think that we should be talking to, please reach out to us. We are hungry for new partners in this work because we know that somewhere in all this conversation, there's going to be brilliant ideas that will really help us find the leverage, find the right resonant voice uh, to kind of push back during these really turbulent and disturbing times. What else should we be doing? If you have ideas for our new playbook, we are happy to hear that, and also to communicate your, creative genius to all of our national partners. Any thoughts there? Anything that comes to mind about ways that we can be pushing against and spurring collective action?
Okay.
It's okay if there's not. It's we yeah we've all been banging our heads on this. Reach out at any time. We're gonna keep at this.
All right, friends, thank you all so much for joining us today. Just heads up, for the next 10 minutes, we're going to be talking about Washington's Cultural Access Program. I know many of you are already living in a place that has one, so this may be a bit of a refresher or something that you may want to get 10 minutes of your time back for. We're happy to have you, but we'll continue talking about cultural access for those of you who want to hear about those opportunities. All right, so let's talk about cultural access. What is cultural access? Well, it is many things. It is a state law. It's an opportunity for local funding programs for science, heritage, and the arts. It's big, it's game changing, it's a transformative opportunity that your community needs. Cultural access can significantly expand the public support you receive so that your programs may fully recover and thrive. So, in 2015, our state legislature created the law that allows city and counties to adopt their own cultural access program with a sales tax. Yes, I said tax. Sales tax of 0.1%, 10 cents for every $100 spent, or if you want to look at it annually, it's about $20 to $40 per year per household. So, it's a very, very small tax. This creates a cultural fund for programs that goes towards free and reduced tickets for community members or field trips for kids, outreach to marginalized communities, and expands resources for cultural programs in general. We have 5 current programs in Washington State. We're really excited about this. Our first program in Tacoma started in 2018. They are our starter program, and they are also up for reauthorization, believe it or not, after those 7 years. Olympia, they passed in 2022. And then King County, which was our very first county program, passed at the end of 2023. And then we have 2 new programs that passed just at the end of last year in November, the City of Vancouver and San Juan County. We're really excited about these new programs coming online and about the future programs that are in the hopper. Oh, Manny, you're on mute.
Sorry. I'm involved in every conversation about cultural access, and considering the times that we're in and the challenges we're facing right now, it's easy to get caught up in the magic of the money instead of what the program is really about. And I just want to remind all of us that it's more than the money. Imagine how an implemented cultural access program will transform community life. Imagine the deep impact of this significant public cultural investment. One, increasing public access to cultural activities. We all know that engagement in science, heritage, and the arts is uplifting and has tremendous impact. But we also know that there are barriers that keep people from cultural programs. Often it's cost. A lot of times in Washington State is simply geography. How far away is that program? There are a lot of reasons. So when you have the money to actually overcome the barriers, imagine how much cultural opportunity our communities will have. The legislature that created this law, boy, they really cared, like all of us, about providing cultural experiences for young people. And therefore, in the law, any authorized cultural access program must have a component that serves public school kids. In fact, they cared so much about field trips in particular that they even wrote in the legislation that the cost of transportation is included. So, cultural access programs will really open doors for science, heritage, and the arts for public school students with things like field trips and in school residencies, curriculum development, and much more than we can imagine in this one little presentation. Now, in a cultural access program, when cultural nonprofits become service providers for the government and do those two bulleted things up above, what is also happening? That cultural nonprofit has a sustainable annual funding that comes to them to do what they are mission bound to do. And we know that reliable funding is critical to the success of our work. And of course, when you do all of those things, when you invest in cultural programs, all the studies show that there's a multiplying effect to those dollars, that it ripples throughout the community, has broad economic impacts because we are creating jobs, we are driving event-based programming, which gets people out of their homes, away from their Netflix, and off their phones into the community where they're going to be paying for parking, probably picking up a drink, doing shopping on Main Street, and just bringing vitality to community life. So it brings prosperity for a whole community. So let's talk about how it works. Well, first of all, cultural advocates like you are informed about this opportunity and they get inspired. They are excited and they start a conversation. They start talking to other cultural leaders in their community about this opportunity before them. And then they start bringing in elected officials because it is the elected officials that are the only people that are positioned and empowered to authorize a program. So now it's a big, broader conversation with city or county council members and the head of this cultural organization and that cultural organization. Um, and everyone starts to imagine how cultural programming can be expanded and how the barriers that stand in the way of people participating are addressed with funding. Eventually all of this crystallizes into a funding plan, right? Like, what will we do with the money? Where will it go? Do we support capital projects? Do we support summer programming or festivals? Like, what is it? So a funding plan gets developed. The cultural access law creates parameters, but for your communities, for Soap Lake or Moses Lake or Pend Oreille County, the specific impact of the work and the areas of investment, as long as they're for cultural programs, is really up to you. There's a lot of flexibility and a lot of opportunity for you to cater something that really speaks to the needs and the gaps within your community. Now, as you get closer to adopting a program, of course, this now becomes legislative activity. An ordinance, legislation will need to get drafted once your authorizers, your city or your county council, decides to start a public process, the legislative process to adopt this into law. So imagine there's an ordinance that's introduced, there are public hearings, there's work sessions where they explore this, and your council will start to make concrete decisions that become baked into a law. And then eventually it ends with them adopting. And councils may authorize by one of two ways. They may refer it to the public for a vote, or because we work so hard to amend the cultural access law, we now have councilmanic authority, which is honestly a much easier and cheaper way to get to an authorized program. And through councilmanic authority, the council is allowed to vote on it in chamber after a public process. For their community, and then it becomes law. What happens next? Well, it takes a number of months, sometimes usually about 3 to 4 months, starting on the next quarter, before they can start collecting the expanded sales tax. And then, of course, it usually, what we've seen in the history of programs is that they usually collect the funds for about a year while they are also working with the administrator of the program, which could be a government agency like their Arts Commission or their Parks Department or their tourism office or whatever. So in that year, they're developing the applications and figuring out the process and all the mechanics of the program. So, but usually it takes about a year for from the beginning of tax collection for the first funds to be distributed.
Oh, there you go. Okay, so now let's talk about who it is can receive those funds. So you must be a nonprofit 501(c)(3) tax exempt organization to receive cultural access funds. You must have a mission in science, heritage, or the arts, a primary mission in science, heritage, or the arts. And you must be providing programming or experiences that are available to the general public. So who cannot receive these funds? You cannot be a state agency, a city government, or a county government, or a public school for that matter. You cannot be a private foundation or radio, television, broadcasting network or station, cable communication systems, or an internet-based communication venture or service, a newspaper or magazine. Not to say that there cannot be, of course, partnerships, because, Manny just talked about field trips and in-school residencies. What this just means is that the 501(c)(3) science, heritage, or arts organization must be the recipient of the funds, but then they can partner with schools or partner with other organizations or businesses to provide those services. So there is some flexibility in that, but yes, the a nonprofit must be the one that receives the money.
All right, getting started. First of all, I want to say there's a number of communities across Washington State that are revving up. You already saw the list of authorized programs. Well, right now, so if you're from these communities, you can reach out to me and I can put you in contact with the folks that are talking about it. But right now, we have active campaigns in Gig Harbor, Clallam County, um, active campaigns. And then we have emerging kind of coalitions developing in Island County and in Whatcom County. Anyone I'm missing, Jessi?
Wakayakum.
Of course, Wakayakum is one that's really getting close. So there's real energy afoot. But let's talk about your county if there's no discussion. How do you get started? Well, you build a team. You can't do this work alone, so start by assembling a larger group of partners. Reach out to other cultural leaders that are providing science, heritage, and arts programming, and educate them about this opportunity. You will also want to invite community groups that benefit from cultural programs. So think about PTSA groups, your Chamber of Commerce, a community foundation, and other nonprofits that care about your community's cultural health. You educate the team on this cultural opportunity, explain what cultural access is, and all that your community can be if you authorize. You also have to identify the champions. Who's going to really be the kind of the point of your spear? Like, for example, on the council, who is the one that you will be working more closely with? Who loves this idea? Who is most is very passionate about convincing every other member of their council to approve this? You will also need to identify the champions outside in the community, just the person who has real influence over council or the community as a whole, like a former mayor or a superintendent, things like that. Who else will really be the ones, the biggest influences? You have to have the hard and fun conversations. The hard conversation is about tax. Many communities across Washington State are experiencing tax fatigue. Now, this is a small tax, and a lot of the hard conversation is just about educating them, getting them after they've been triggered by the T word, is really explaining to them that this is not the same thing as the kind of tax that your community had to pay when you built a new city hall or a new fire station or a new high school, right? That this is a small tax, somewhere between $20 to $40 per household, everyone in the household per year. And the fact that it will have a significant amount of benefit. So that's the fun conversation. What do you get to do with the money? Where are the gaps in your community programming? The field trips that the school can no longer afford, or the events that people will be able to attend because now there will be free access. Those are wonderful conversations that in every program that we have today, the community was excited to talk about. It's important to start planning community engagement. um, you want to make sure that you get out in front and have an opportunity to explain your vision before those cranky people show up in council and start complaining about paying more taxes. So you really want to make sure that the community is involved and engaged and educated. Ultimately, all of this work is creating a cultural vision. your community's cultural future. These funds are an investment, and your community will be enriched and better 7 years down the road after the full implementation. Of course, this is our job. Inspire Washington, one of our original nonprofits, Cultural Access Washington, created this law. We are passionate about this. We are here to help you and coach you and mentor you. Of course, with 39 counties and 281 cities and towns, we can't be the lead on every effort. And also, the city council in Eastern Washington doesn't want the Seattle guy to be telling them to implement new taxes. But we are here as your partners to help lead you through the complicated but very inspiring process. So reach out to us.